I've never needed a spotlight. I wasn't raised that way. Some people crave applause, centerpieces, and the loud clink of glasses during toasts made in their honor. Me? I like full plates, full hearts, and knowing I did right by the people I care about. That's how I've always moved, quiet, steady, present. So when Julian turned one, I planned the kind of party I thought he'd grow into one day remembering. A small backyard gathering, nothing fancy. Just a handful of friends, a balloon arch I stayed up till midnight inflating, and a cake I ordered from the bakery Camilla liked most, the one with the buttercream roses. I grilled the burgers myself, even though it was 92 degrees and the sun sat directly overhead. I stocked the coolers with everyone's drinks, kombucha for Camilla's sister, sparkling lemonade for Darlene, regular soda for the kids. I even brought extra ice when I noticed the bag from earlier was melting too fast. That's just the kind of man I am. Always paying attention to the things no one thinks to notice. The afternoon had a soft hum to it. The sound of children laughing, someone's Bluetooth speaker playing that same playlist Camilla always queued up. I didn't mind. I made sure the trash bags were replaced before they overflowed, kept checking to see if anyone needed napkins, and when the baby smashed his little hands into his cake, I laughed like everyone else. Even though I was the one who ended up scrubbing frosting from the cracks in the patio later. After the candles were blown out and the last cupcake was devoured, I stood next to the cooler, sipping a watered-down soda, and said it without much thought. Just a casual, happy comment, the kind you make when you think you're part of something that continues after the last guest leaves. Can't wait for the family dinner tomorrow. It was a simple sentence. No drama, no grand emotion. Just a quiet, sincere statement. But the air changed the second it left my mouth. I noticed Betrayal first. Her head snapped around, and then she laughed. Not a chuckle. Not a light giggle. She laughed hard, the kind of laugh people do when they think you're painfully out of the loop. Wait, you didn't know? That was yesterday, she said, eyes still bright with mockery. I didn't respond at first. I just blinked, hoping maybe I misheard her. Or that she was confused. That someone, anyone, would correct her. But nobody did. I turned toward Darlene. She was lounging in one of the folding chairs, fanning herself with a paper plate. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and started swiping through her photos like she was searching for a coupon. Then she turned the screen toward me. And there it was. A long dinner table, set with glowing string lights and linen napkins. Smiling faces. Raised glasses. Someone had even baked a tiered cake, one I hadn't heard about, hadn't been invited to cut, hadn't even smelled being baked. Cousins I hadn't seen in months were there. People who didn't show up today had shown up for that. The real gathering. The real celebration. The one they actually cared about. The one I was never meant to be part of. I studied the photos longer than I probably should have. Every image looked like it had been edited for a holiday ad. But all I could see were the missing pieces, me and my son. We weren't in a single frame. Julian hadn't been there. And neither had I. That's when I heard it. Camilla's voice, quiet but sharp enough to pierce the middle of my chest. Maybe take the hint next time. I turned toward her slowly. Her back was half turned, like she didn't really want to be caught looking me in the eyes. She was adjusting the plates on the dessert table, lining things up even though most of the food was already gone. That little smirk she always wore when she knew she had the last word? Yeah, it was there. Subtle, but there. She didn't need to say anything else. That one line told me everything. It told me the dinner wasn't an accident or miscommunication. It told me it wasn't a surprise party gone wrong or something I had just missed. It was a message. A carefully planned omission. A hint I was expected to pick up on, interpret, and quietly accept. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or make a scene. That's never been my style. People like me don't flip tables. We just stop setting them. So I walked to the coat rack by the kitchen door. Slid my jacket off the hook where I'd hung it hours earlier. Reached into the inside pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying for 3 weeks. It wasn't wrinkled. I had checked it every few days, made sure it stayed clean, uncreased, untouched. The letter inside had been printed on heavy stock paper. Signed, notarized. Reviewed twice by my attorney. I walked back out onto the patio where Camilla stood. The music was still playing, the kids still chasing each other in circles with melted popsicles in their hands. Camilla was laughing at something her cousin said. She didn't see me right away, but when I stepped closer, her laughter faded. I didn't say anything. I just handed her the envelope. She took it with a light, confused grip, like she thought it was a gift card or a receipt. She turned it over, still smiling politely, and then her expression changed. Not all at once, Just a slow fade, like sunlight being dimmed by a passing cloud. I didn't wait for her to open it. I didn't need to see her reaction. It wasn't for drama. It was for clarity. I walked past her. Past the half-eaten cake and the cooler of drinks I had stocked. Past Betrayal, who was now whispering something to her boyfriend with a look of concern creeping into her face. I stepped into the house, grabbed my keys from the counter, and left through the front door. No one followed me. No one called my name. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to look back. There's something oddly dangerous about being the kind of man people forget to notice. You become a part of the furniture. Useful, reliable, silent. You fix the wobbly chair legs, replace the light bulbs, pay the bills before anyone knows they're due. But nobody ever asks how you're doing. They just assume you're fine, because you're always fine, aren't you? That's what the quiet years were like. When Camilla and I first got married, I thought we were building something together. We lived in a modest apartment over a bakery, and I remember how we used to laugh when the whole place smelled like fresh bread at 5 a.m. Even back then, I knew I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the guy with poetic declarations or dramatic surprises. But I was there. Every day. I'd wake up early to make her coffee just the way she liked it. Half a spoon of sugar, dash of cinnamon, oat milk. I'd kiss her forehead before leaving for work and text her on lunch breaks just to say hi. Not because I wanted praise. Because I loved her. But the thing is, love that goes unrecognized starts to wear down like water on stone. Slowly. Quietly. You don't notice the erosion until you look up one day and realize there's nothing left to hold on to. Camilla's family never warmed up to me. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't engaging enough. Maybe I didn't crack the right jokes at Sunday dinners. Maybe I should have pretended to like wine tastings or trivia nights. So I tried. For years, I tried. I joined their game nights, complimented their cooking, even laughed at Uncle Ricky's same 5 stories. But they never saw me as one of them. I was Camilla's husband. That's how I was introduced. That's how I was listed in group chats, if I was included at all. There was a group vacation to Lake Placid once. I saw it on Instagram. Matching sweatshirts, wine toast by the fire, captions like family time is the best time. Julian wasn't born yet, and Camilla told me she thought I'd be too busy with work to enjoy it anyway. I nodded and didn't argue. I worked that weekend, all right. Cleaned the garage. Fixed the leaky sink. Spent 3 hours trying to hang up a gallery wall she had bookmarked on Pinterest. When she got home, she barely noticed. She just said, thanks, and walked into the bedroom. Then there were the birthdays. Mine always landed in the middle of someone else's drama. One year it was Brielle's breakup. The next year it was Darlene's gallbladder surgery. My birthdays became afterthoughts. I got generic cards and awkward hugs while I sat there eating store-bought cake, wondering how I managed to become invisible in my own life. But through it all, I stayed. I honestly believed, that showing up, that being consistent, would eventually win me a seat at the table. Not just the literal one, but the emotional one. The space where people say, hey, how's he doing? Or, let's make sure he's included. I thought if I kept loving them hard enough, quietly enough, they'd finally look up and realize I'd always been there. Instead, what I got was nothing. No acknowledgement. No reciprocity. Just more cold smiles and hollow pleasantries. More forgotten invites and edited out photos. Camilla never said anything about it, either. She just told me to get over it. Or worse, stop overthinking. When I tried to explain how I felt, she'd roll her eyes and say, you always make things about you. But I wasn't making it about me. I was just asking not to be erased. The worst part? I let it go on. For years. I kept my head down, convinced myself I was overreacting. I rationalized everything. Told myself this was just how families are sometimes. Told myself that love meant compromise. Told myself that if I just stayed patient a little longer, things would turn around. But love without recognition becomes servitude. And compromise, without reciprocation, becomes self-erasure. One night, about 8 months before Julian's first birthday, I came home late from work. I'd stopped to grab Camilla her favorite takeout from that Thai place she liked. She was sitting in the living room with her laptop open, headphones in. I set the food down and waved, smiling like a fool. She didn't even look up, just held up a finger like, give me a minute, and then went right back to typing. That minute turned into 30. Then an hour. The food got cold. I ate mine in silence and left hers on the table. She never touched it. That night, lying awake in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and thought, I could vanish tomorrow and no one in this house would notice until something didn't get done. That was the loud realization. That was the moment I started looking at things differently. Started seeing the patterns. The way I was used but never considered. The way they liked what I brought, but not who I was. Camilla's family never planned to see me. They just enjoyed what I provided. I was the invisible scaffold holding everything together. Useful, silent, replaceable. But something shifted after that. I stopped volunteering to pick up things for people. Stopped offering to fix Brielle's car or hang lights at Darlene's house. I didn't say anything. I just stopped. Nobody noticed at first. That told me everything. I could pull away slowly, piece by piece, and they wouldn't even feel the change. Because I was never in the picture. I was just part of the background. I started documenting things. Quietly. Digitally. I went through our finances and listed every bill I paid, every extra favor I did. I compiled screenshots, receipts, even text messages. Not because I was planning anything drastic yet, but because I wanted to be sure that when the time came, I wouldn't second-guess myself. I'd have proof, not for a court, for me, to remind myself that I had not imagined it. The pain of being invisible doesn't always come with yelling or cruelty. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the quiet dismissal, in the glance over your shoulder when you walk into the room. And the thing is, I could have lived like that for another decade if something didn't snap me out of it. But that birthday party, that laugh, those photos, that whisper was the final crack in the dam. The years of being good weren't enough. The years of being dependable weren't enough. I wasn't family to them. I was just convenient. And so, for the first time, I started planning what it would look like to leave. Not with anger, not with malice, but with certainty. Because once you realize you've been setting the table for people who never planned to save you a seat, the only thing left to do is stop serving. 3 weeks before Julian's first birthday party, I met with my lawyer. Her name's Donna Helms, sharp, quiet, and deeply thorough. The kind of person who speaks like she's already anticipated your next 10 moves. I'd chosen her not because I expected fireworks, but because I needed silence with impact. That kind of silence that doesn't scream, but changes everything. When I slid the thick manila envelope across her desk, I said plainly, I need this to be clean. No fights, no drama, no room for argument. She read through my notes, my list of deeds and documents, then looked up at me with a softness I didn't expect. You sure? She asked. I nodded. I'd never been more certain. Because this wasn't about punishment, it was about peace. Camilla didn't know it, but the home we lived in, the one she painted pale gray and decorated with minimalist furniture and endless succulents, was mine. I bought it 3 months before we got married. Paid the down payment in full. It was a fixer-upper when I first saw it, with leaky gutters and a cracked foundation, but I saw something in it. Potential. Just like I saw in our relationship at the time. She had moved in with the assumption that it was our home. And in a way, I let her believe that. I wanted her to feel it was hers too. I gave her full reign over the decor, never pushed back when she insisted on replacing things that didn't need replacing, or when she ordered overpriced custom drapes to match the vibe. I just smiled and made sure the mortgage was paid every month. Quietly. Steadily. That was my rhythm. But as the years wore on, I noticed something. She never once asked about the deed. Never asked whose name was on the title. Never questioned how the utilities were handled or where the money came from. It wasn't malicious, I don't think. It was entitlement dressed as assumption. She assumed, because I never raised my voice, because I always gave in, that everything was automatically ours, and by ours, she meant hers to direct. That's why the letter mattered. Inside that envelope I handed her on Julian's birthday was a simple, legally binding notice. Camilla was being given 48 hours to vacate the property. It wasn't cruel. It was calm, precise. It referenced the title deed, the ownership documents, and a clause from a premarital agreement she signed without reading properly, one she waved off at the time as boring paperwork. Donna made sure it was ironclad. It outlined that, upon breach of certain personal conduct thresholds, yes, that's how he phrased it, residency could be revoked within 2 days. I wasn't kicking her out because of an affair or some scandal. I wasn't dragging her through mud. I was simply honoring the last thread of dignity I had left. Because if someone could whisper, maybe take the hint next time, and not even flinch, then they no longer deserve the safety of my silence. That night, after the guests left, Camilla didn't open the letter right away. She tucked it into her purse like it was a thank you note. I went upstairs, packed an overnight bag, and slept on the small pullout in my office. I didn't want conflict. I wanted space. At 3:12 a.m., I heard the rustle of paper, the creak of the floorboards outside the office. Then footsteps, slow, unsure, retreating back into the bedroom. She read it. She didn't knock. She didn't cry. No shouting. That told me everything I needed to know. The shock didn't come from the letter. It came from the realization that I meant it. By morning, she was gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Her closet was half empty. She hadn't taken much, just a duffel bag, some clothes, her laptop. The nursery remained untouched. Julian was still asleep, soft breaths puffing out of his tiny mouth. I stood in the doorway for a while, just watching him. There was so much innocence in that room. None of this was his fault. None of it ever would be. And I made a promise in that moment, not out loud, not written down, but inside my chest, that I would protect him from the noise. I would never let him grow up confused about what love looks like. By noon that day, I changed the locks. I called the locksmith I'd used when we first moved in, a guy named Hector, who always wore red Sox caps and whistled while he worked. I didn't explain much. Just said I needed new locks, quickly. He came by within the hour. We stood on the porch while he unboxed the hardware, and he said something that stayed with me. "You know," he said, twisting a screwdriver into the frame, "most people only change the locks after something bad happens. Break-in, divorce, bad blood. But sometimes, you just need to change him to feel safe again. Even if the danger wasn't loud." I nodded, because I knew what he meant. The danger wasn't loud in my case. It was subtle, slow, a gradual corrosion of trust, of partnership, of belonging. And by the time I realized how far gone things were, I was standing alone at my own son's party, being laughed at like I was the punchline. Once the locks were changed, I sat at the kitchen table with a single cup of coffee. No breakfast, no conversation, just me, the new keys in my palm, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with finality. It's not joy. It's not relief. It's just stillness. Like when a storm passes and you're left with the scent of wet asphalt and broken branches, but also air you can finally breathe. I sent Camilla a final message that afternoon. It read, "The locks have been changed. Your 48-hour access remains active via the side door. After that, please coordinate any remaining item retrieval through Donna. I want to engage in circular conversations. Julian's schedule remains unchanged. His safety and peace are my only priority now. I wish you clarity, not revenge. M." I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. But that message was more than logistics. It was my boundary. For the first time in our entire marriage, I wasn't playing the quiet one, the fixer, the appeaser. I was standing still. And when you've been bending for so long, stillness feels radical. I looked around the house, my house. It no longer felt like a battleground or a stage for someone else's performance. It felt like mine, like a space I could finally reclaim, not just physically, but emotionally. That's what the letter did. That's what the lock did. They didn't just close a door. They reminded me that I had the right to protect what was mine, and not just the bricks and mortar. My peace, my worth, my future. After the locks were changed and the air inside the house finally felt like mine again, I sat down with a folder I'd kept hidden in my office drawer for over a year. It was plain, navy blue, no labels. Inside were spreadsheets, receipts, contracts, records of every silent favor, every quiet bailout, every dollar I had poured into people who never thought to ask where the help was coming from. I wasn't a martyr. I didn't do it for credit. I just believed back then that supporting family was supposed to be quiet, selfless. That real love wasn't loud, it was practical. But when someone tells you to take the hint, when they let you stand on the outside of their circle like a stranger at your own family gathering, that illusion shatters. And all that quiet generosity? Suddenly, it starts to feel a lot like being taken for a fool. Let's start with Julian's daycare. We'd found a good place, clean, nurturing, SM. Camilla loved it. She bragged about it constantly to her friends. What she never mentioned, what she never even asked about, was how it got paid for. Every month, on the 1st, tuition was withdrawn from a business account tied to an LLC I owned. She assumed it came from our joint account, the one she barely contributed to. She never noticed that it wasn't. Then there was Brielle's car. About a year ago, she showed up crying on our doorstep, mascara streaking down her face, claiming her car was about to be repossessed. She'd fallen behind on payments. Bad breakup. No savings. She said, "I just need a miracle." Camilla hugged her like it was a soap opera scene. I didn't say much. I just nodded and told her I'd look into it. 2 days later, the car was hers again, paid off in full. What Brielle never knew, what none of them knew, was that I'd structured the payment as a private loan through that same LLC, with a clause that said repayment could be waived or reversed. It was my quiet way of offering a lifeline, but still protecting myself if things ever went sideways. They never imagined things would. And Camilla's Etsy business? That was the biggest one. She always called it her creative outlet. Handmade candles, curated gift boxes, seasonal decor with little hand-tied ribbons. She'd tell everyone she built it from the ground up. What she didn't tell them was that the boxes she used, the shipping materials, the upgraded website, all of it was funded by me. I set up a wholesale account under the LLC's umbrella, gave her access to the materials at cost, even helped her install shelves in the garage to organize inventory. She'd light a candle at night and say, "Isn't it crazy how far I've come?" And I'd smile, not because I needed credit, but because I thought love looked like lifting someone quietly. But when she whispered those 5 words at the party, "Maybe take the hint next time," everything I'd done rewrote itself in my head. It wasn't love I was giving. It was labor. And it was time to take it back. That evening, after Julian fell asleep, I sat at my desk and printed 3 letters. Each was professionally formatted, addressed, and signed by my attorney. Each one was rooted in fact, not emotion. I wasn't looking to punish anyone. I just wanted the ledger cleared. If they saw me as invisible, then fine. Let them see what disappears when the invisible man walks away. The first letter went to Darlene, my mother-in-law. For 2 years, she'd been receiving a monthly maintenance stipend. She thought it came from a family fund her late husband had set up. He hadn't. That fund ran dry years ago. I quietly took it over to avoid drama. $500 every month. Auto-deposited. No thanks ever came. No questions. Just expectation. The letter stated that all future payments were suspended effective immediately and outlined the transactions to date, with a gentle reminder that continued disbursements were never guaranteed nor contractually obligated. The second went to Brielle. This one was worded with more legal firmness. Her car payoff had been documented as a loan. A lenient one, yes, but still enforceable. The letter stated that due to a breach of good faith, my lawyer's phrase, not mine, the loan had been reactivated and repayment in full was expected within 60 days, or a lien would be filed. I didn't want her money. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd received and forgotten. I wanted her to realize miracles aren't free. They're often funded by people you forget to invite to dinner. The third letter was for Camilla. It was the thickest envelope. Inside, she found not just the legal notice about vacating the home, but a full record of financial support I'd given her over the years. Not out of spite, but transparency. Every dollar, every transaction, from the Etsy startup fund to the emergency dental work she'd needed last fall. From the travel points I gave her for that girl's trip to Miami, to the therapy sessions she never thanked me for attending together. I itemized it all. Calm, clean, indisputable. But the hardest part? The postscript. You were never my burden, Camilla. I just became yours. This isn't about revenge. It's about release. We both deserve to stop pretending that this works. Consider this the gift you never knew you needed, the truth. I sealed all 3 envelopes and sent them by courier. No text follow-ups. No explanations. I wanted the silence to carry more weight than any confrontation ever could. The next day, my phone started buzzing. First from a number I didn't recognize, probably Darlene. Then Brielle. Then Camilla's cousin. The one who always played peacemaker but never quite stood up for me when it mattered. I let every call go to voicemail. I didn't even listen to them. My inbox filled with question marks, accusations, and the occasional half-hearted plea. I didn't answer a single one. Because here's what I finally understood. Support given in silence should never be confused with weakness. And generosity without recognition isn't kindness, it's unpaid labor. I wasn't punishing them. I was subtracting myself. Let them feel the gaps. Let them stumble where I used to quietly smooth the floor. I took a long walk that evening. No music, no headphones, just the sound of gravel crunching under my shoes. I passed the coffee shop Camilla loved, the one where I used to wait outside with Julian while she caught up with her friends. I didn't stop. I didn't even look in. I just kept walking, breathing in the first taste of a life I was finally reclaiming. For the first time in years, I wasn't asking, what do they need from me? I was asking, what do I need for myself? And the answer was simple, peace. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind that follows a good meal or the kind that hangs between two people who don't need words. No, this was the tense, charged silence before a storm hits. A stillness so unnatural that even the birds seemed to stop singing. For 24 hours after I sent the letters, my phone stayed quiet. I half expected it. Shock tends to stun people into silence before it ignites panic. But by the next morning, the storm arrived in full. It began as a buzz, then a ring, then another, and another, until my phone felt like it was vibrating out of my desk drawer. Voicemails, missed calls, texts flooding in one after the other, all of them starting with confusion, quickly escalating into blame. The first message was from Camilla's cousin Monica. "Hey, just heard something weird from Betrayal. Is everything okay?" Then came the one from Darlene. "What is this letter? This has to be a mistake. You don't treat family this way." And then, of course, Betrayal. "Are you serious right now? After everything I've gone through, you're really doing this?" Each message dripped with a mix of entitlement and disbelief. None of them asked how I was. None of them paused to wonder why I'd reached this point. To them, I was the villain for disrupting the comfort they'd built, comfort I had paid for, maintained, and been excluded from. I didn't respond. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I had nothing left to say. I had said it all in the silence they never bothered to hear. Then the real blow-up came. A group chat titled Family Discussion. I didn't create it. It appeared sometime in the afternoon. I stared at the name for a few seconds before opening it. Inside were 23 messages from Camilla, her mother, her cousins, and yes, even her great-aunt Judith, who hadn't texted me since our wedding, and even then, only to correct the seating chart. Camilla's first message was blunt. "What the hell is going on?" That was followed by a paragraph from Darlene about ungratefulness and the importance of appearances. Then came Betrayal, practically unspooling her entire sob story about how she didn't deserve to be treated like a criminal over one mistake. I kept scrolling. Each message read like a monologue, none of them directed at me as a person, just a problem to solve. Or better yet, a disruption to erase. Camilla eventually sent the final one. "If this is about that stupid dinner, grow up. You're a father now. Act like one." That was the one that stung. Not because it was cruel, but because it confirmed everything. To her, I wasn't a man with feelings, or a partner who had been slowly chipped away at over years. I was a utility, a father, a bank, a background character. So I wrote one line and sent it to the group. "Call first. Property is locked." Then I left the chat. The effect was immediate. Within minutes, messages started coming in individually. Threats, guilt trips, accusations. Camilla's uncle Mark, who once asked me for help with a business loan he never repaid, sent a particularly bold one. "You need to stop this. You don't want me showing up and settling this in person." I almost laughed. Instead, I simply texted back. "Try it. The cameras are already recording. And yes, I'll press charges." Then I blocked his number. By sunset, the only person I heard from who didn't try to gaslight or guilt trip me was my friend James. Not family. Not someone who benefited from me. Just a friend. He called and said, "Heard a bit of a storm's rolling through. You all right?" I told him the truth. "I'm fine. Just letting the thunder wear itself out." He paused, then said something I've never forgotten. "Sometimes the loudest noise comes from people realizing they lost their favorite doormat." That night, I sat in my office, phone off, sipping black coffee as my inbox lit up like a fire alarm. There was something poetic about it, really. All those years I begged for connection, a seat at the table, some shred of acknowledgement, and now, suddenly, I was the center of attention. Not out of love. Out of panic. It hit me then. Their concern wasn't about me. It was about access, control, routine. I had disrupted the rhythm they depended on. I was no longer the one refilling drinks, driving the kids to last-minute sleepovers, fixing broken faucets, or wiring quiet support money from a family fund. I was gone, but still standing, and they didn't know how to deal with that. Camilla, in particular, seemed to unravel faster than the rest. Her emails grew longer, less polished, more personal. One said, "Julian's going to grow up thinking his father is bitter and spiteful. You're hurting your own son with this performance." I didn't reply, because she didn't understand. What I was doing was for Julian. I wanted him to grow up knowing boundaries, knowing that love doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment, that being dependable doesn't mean being disposable. I wanted him to see that a man can be kind and still walk away when kindness is mocked. I wanted him to know you don't have to burn down the house, but you can lock the doors. The next morning, the calls slowed. The messages tapered off. And in their place came something even more satisfying than rage. Silence. Real silence. No noise. No shouting. Just the quiet absence of people who never truly saw me, until I stepped out of their shadow. I opened my blinds, let the morning light pour into the room, and breathed. It was the first time in years that I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. No more trying to measure the emotional temperature of everyone else in the room. No more checking group chats to see if I'd been forgotten again. Let the storm scream. Let it rage. I'd already found my shelter, and this time, it didn't have space for people who only came to take. There's a certain story Camilla's family loves to tell about the beach house in Greyhaven. According to them, it was a treasured family legacy passed down from Darlene's father. They talked about it like it was sacred ground. Every summer, they'd pack up their coolers and towels and make the 2-hour drive down to that old coastal property, telling tales of childhood bonfires and the time a hurricane nearly tore the roof off. To hear them speak about it, you'd think that beach house was the beating heart of their bloodline. But here's the thing about stories. They're only true if you bother to check the paperwork. I bought the beach house during the pandemic. Not all at once, of course. It started when I learned that Darlene had fallen behind on property taxes. Quietly, I stepped in and paid off 2 years' worth of arrears, no questions asked. Darlene thought the county had made some error and chalked it up to divine grace. I didn't correct her. Then came the renovations. I paid for the new roof, the plumbing repairs, the deck rebuilt. Again, all through the LLC. Darlene signed the construction contracts without reading the fine print. Each one contained a clause, partial equity transfers to the managing investor. That investor? Me. By the time refinancing talks came around, Camilla signed over the rest of it. She didn't even blink, just scribbled her name on the dotted line while sipping her oat milk latte, thinking we were consolidating for lower interest. She never asked whose name the title was under afterward. Never asked about the new insurance policy. Because why would she? I was the dependable one. The background man. The guy who handled things. And so, for years, they kept using the house like it was theirs. Every 4th of July, every long weekend, I'd get a text, not an invite, letting me know who would be staying there and when. They never cleaned up properly. Left sand in the sinks, red wine stains on the outdoor cushions. I paid a local cleaner to go in afterward, quietly, before I showed up for my own visits. I never said a word. Until this year. A week before the July 4th holiday, the same flurry of messages rolled in. Camilla's cousins were planning the usual weekend at the house. Betrayal had already posted about sunset margaritas with the girls. Darlene sent a list of groceries she expected to find in the fridge. Not once did anyone ask, "Hey, is it okay if we use the house this year?" They never had to ask, right? Because in their minds, it was theirs. But this time, I didn't respond with my usual quiet compliance. This time, I filed for exclusive partition use. It's a legal term that basically means I have primary access and full control. And since my LLC owned 100% of the property on record, the court signed off without hesitation. I had the paperwork delivered to Darlene's address with signature confirmation. The moment she signed for it, the countdown began. 3 days later, I drove down to Greyhaven with a bag in the trunk, a folder of documents, and an unexpected lightness in my chest. The town hadn't changed much. Same sleepy diners, same narrow roads lined with pines. When I pulled up to the beach house, I just sat in the driveway for a moment, staring at the porch Camilla once insisted we repaint pale blue to match the ocean. I used to think it looked washed out. Now, it just looked clean. The gate wasn't installed yet, but I'd already arranged for the contractor to meet me that afternoon. Around noon, the caravan arrived. 3 cars, packed with beach bags, pool floats, plastic-wrapped casseroles, and enough sunscreen to coat an army. I watched from the porch as they pulled in, laughing, music blaring, kids jumping out barefoot. Darlene was the first to see me. She froze midway through opening her car door. Her eyes narrowed, lips tightening. "You're here?" she asked. I nodded. "Yep. This is family weekend," she said, her voice rising, like volume could rewrite fact. "Exactly," I replied. "Which is why it's closed." She looked confused for a second, like the words didn't make sense. Like I had just said something in another language. Then Camilla stepped out of the passenger side of Brielle's car, sunglasses perched high on her head, expression unreadable. "Miles, what are you doing?" she asked, as if I were the one breaking tradition. Following the law, I said calmly, reaching into my bag and handing her a laminated copy of the court document. Exclusive use. Signed. Sealed. She flipped through it, lips parting in disbelief. You're serious. Dead serious. By now, the others were gathering. Cousins whispering. Kids asking when they could go inside. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stood there on the porch of a house they used to treat like a playground and reminded them that it wasn't theirs to invade anymore. This place was never yours, I said, my voice steady. You just assumed I'd never say anything. Darlene started to object, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. This isn't a debate. You signed the documents. You cashed the checks. You handed me the keys years ago. You just never noticed. Camilla stared at me, something shifting behind her eyes. Not anger. Not guilt. Just realization. For the first time, I think she truly understood that I hadn't been a passive fixture in her world. I'd been the one holding it together. Quietly. Legally. Completely. They left 30 minutes later, their car slower, their laughter gone. No one said goodbye. As I watched the last vehicle disappear down the gravel road, I called the contractor. Time to install the gate, I said. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the water, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and no noise. No demands. No guests. Just me, the ocean breeze, and the sound of the world adjusting to my absence from theirs. Funny how they only started seeing me the moment I closed the door. The gate went up 2 days after the confrontation at the beach house. I stood at the edge of the driveway, watching the crew install the metal posts, their drills buzzing like angry bees against concrete. I didn't pick anything fancy. No electronic keypad, no coded entry, just a heavy-duty swing gate with a lock and a bold black sign that said exactly what I needed it to say, private property. Access by permission only. It wasn't just a barrier of steel. It was a declaration. A line drawn not just through the property, but through my life. It had taken me years to realize that sometimes the only way to move forward is to close something for good. Not out of hate, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. That house had been used, misused, and paraded around like some family heirloom they had every right to. They told stories about how it had always been in the family, while never lifting a finger to preserve it. They never paid for a new roof, never fixed the cracked tiles, never replaced the porch lights. They just kept showing up, expecting it to be waiting for them. Clean, cared for, paid for, by me, but not anymore. I watched as the contractor tightened the last bolt, wiped his brow, and gave me a quick nod. That'll hold, he said. I handed him the final check and replied, it's not about keeping people out. It's about keeping myself in. He didn't ask what I meant. Maybe he understood. Maybe he didn't have to. Later that day, I drove into town and met with the couple I had been exchanging emails with for weeks. Their names were Russell and Ingrid, retired teachers from Vermont looking for a quiet coastal retreat. They'd found the beach house listing by accident, reached out through my LLC's real estate channel, and after a few video calls, I knew they were the right ones. Kind. Peaceful. No drama. They loved the space for what it was, not what it represented. At the coffee shop, Russell slid a folder across the table. Final paperwork, he said. We're ready when you are. I flipped through the pages, then paused at the clause I had written in myself. One line tucked into the agreement, legally binding and unmistakable. Former tenants, guests, or extended family of the seller are not permitted to access or use the property for any reason post-transfer. Ingrid looked up and gave me a knowing smile. Bad history? She asked. I shrugged. Not bad. Just long. And one side. We signed the documents, shook hands, and just like that, the house was no longer mine. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel loss. I felt something lighter, like I had dropped a heavy suitcase at the end of a long, uphill walk. Before I left Greyhaven, I made one final stop at the house. It was empty now, no laughter, no coolers, no screaming kids or sandy footprints. Just the echo of waves and the soft rustle of trees lining the backyard. I walked through the room slowly, checking each one as if to say goodbye. The kitchen still smelled faintly of sea salt and lemon oil. The guest room, the one Camilla's cousins always fought over, was spotless. The master bedroom held no trace of her anymore. In the living room, I sat on the couch and opened my bag. Inside was a single manila envelope. I had debated leaving anything at all, but some goodbyes deserve words, even if they're never read aloud. I pulled out the letter I had written the night after the gate was installed. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was just honest. To whoever comes looking for what they think still belongs to them. This place was once a symbol of connection. I kept it alive, hoping someone would eventually treat it with the same care I did. But over time, it became a symbol of something else, a place I maintained while being treated like I didn't exist. You didn't lose the house. You lost the person who kept opening the door. I placed the letter on the mantel above the fireplace and walked out without looking back. I didn't lock the door. That wasn't my job anymore. On the drive home, I played no music. Just let the wind fill the car, the road unfolding ahead of me like a clean slate. There were no messages from Camilla. No calls from Darlene or Brielle. Just silence. But it wasn't the kind that comes before a storm. It was the kind that comes after. I got home just after sunset and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. Not for an occasion. Just for myself. I sat on the back porch, Julian asleep upstairs, the baby monitor glowing quietly beside me, and took a deep breath. This was what peace looked like. No drama. No demands. No gatecrashers. The next morning, I checked my inbox. There it was, an email from the escrow company. Sale complete. Funds transferred. Transfer of ownership confirmed. Attached was a final document, certificate of sale. I saved it in a folder titled Closed Chapters. It sat right next to the PDFs of Camilla's vacate letter, Brielle's revoked loan, and the termination of Darlene's monthly payments. All quiet acts. All without yelling. All legal. All final. Later that week, I received a text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. How could you? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because the truth is, they all knew how. They just never believed I would. I had always been the man who said yes. The man who stayed quiet. The one who picked up the tab, replaced the batteries, fixed the broken hinges. But not anymore. The gate was up. The property was sold. And the next time they tried to show up like they always did, they'd find strangers living there, and a letter that would hit harder than any locked door. It had been quiet for weeks. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty, but the kind that finally lets you hear your own thoughts. The beach house was gone, the locks were changed, the calls had slowed, and my home, what was left of it, was peaceful. I had settled into a rhythm. Mornings with Julian, evenings with a book and no phone. I didn't realize how much of my life had been built around responding to other people's noise until the noise stopped. Then one evening, I got a message. Not from Camilla. Not from Darlene. Not from the cousins who used to pop in only when they needed something. This message came from Ava, Brielle's daughter. She was just 8, but smart for her age. Sweet. Observant. The kind of kid who colored quietly in the corner while everyone else was yelling over each other during holidays. I'd always had a soft spot for her. She used to call me Uncle Milesy and ask me to cut the crust off her sandwiches whenever she visited. The message came as a short video on a private account. I almost didn't open it. Thought it might be another veiled attempt from Brielle to get my attention. But something told me to check. When the video started playing, I had to sit down. Ava was whispering, her big eyes darting left and right like she was worried someone might hear. Uncle Miles. Mommy says not to talk to you. But I miss you. Behind her, I could hear shouting. Muffled, but sharp. Then Camilla's voice, unmistakable even through static. Give me the phone, Ava. Now. The video cut off. It was only 17 seconds long, but it felt like a punch to the chest. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the replay button. I watched it again. And again. Each time, I picked up more in her tone, the tremble in her voice, the way her hands fidgeted with the edge of a blanket. She wasn't just saying she missed me. She was reaching out, hoping someone on the other side still remembered her. And in that moment, all the bitterness I had worked so hard to let go of came flooding back in. Not because I was angry at Ava, far from it, but because kids were now being dragged into this mess, being told who to love, who to avoid, who to pretend doesn't exist anymore. I thought I had ended the cycle by walking away. I thought the silence would be enough. But I forgot something important. Silence also creates space. And when people like Camilla or Brielle control that space, they fill it with their own stories. That night, I recorded a video back. I waited until Julian was asleep. The house was dim and quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, phone propped up, coffee mug beside me. I didn't write a script. I didn't rehearse. I just spoke. Hey, sweet girl, I began, keeping my voice soft. It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. I know things feel weird right now, and people are saying a lot of things, but I want you to know something very important. I paused, took a breath. You were never just someone in the background to me. I remember every time you asked me to read you bedtime stories, even the long ones. I remember how you helped me hang those fairy lights in the backyard that one summer. I remember you. And I always will. Another pause. My voice caught a little, but I steadied it. You don't have to pretend for anyone. Not for me. Not for them. But I want you to know, I'm here. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who listens, someone who just sees you, I'm still that person. No matter what they say. I ended the video simply. Take care of yourself. And remember, you matter. Always. I didn't send it right away. I sat with it. Reread it. Thought about what it might stir. But I couldn't let fear dictate what love was supposed to look like. So I sent it. Ava didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. She was a child in a house where loyalty was confused with silence. But I hoped that, at some point, when the noise quieted again, she'd open that message and remember that not everyone walked away because they stopped caring. Some of us walked away because we finally started. Days passed. Then a week. No new videos. No return message. But then something small happened, something most people wouldn't notice. Ava changed her profile picture. It used to be a selfie of her and Betrayal at the beach. The new one? It was a blurry photo of her holding a snow globe I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago. The one with the tiny carousel inside. No words. No caption. Just the image. But I saw it. And I knew she was speaking in the only way she could. This wasn't about dragging her back into my life. I didn't need her to pick sides. I just wanted her to remember what real kindness felt like. What honesty sounded like. Because kids aren't just mirrors of their parents, they're windows. And sometimes, all they need is someone to keep the light on from the other side. That night, I stood outside Julian's room, watching him sleep. He was growing so fast. Already walking with that unsure little wobble. Already reaching for things with both hands like the world was his to touch. I wondered what kind of man he would become. What kind of truth he would be told about the quiet days when everything changed. And I made another silent promise. He would never have to dig through half-truths to understand me. He would never have to send secret messages just to be seen. Because I would show up. Always. Fully. Even if I wasn't invited. Even if I had to stand outside the walls of other people's stories. Even if it meant being the villain in someone else's version of the tale. If standing tall made me the enemy, so be it. At least my son, and maybe even Ava, would know that sometimes, walking away is the loudest way to say, I love you. I hadn't looked at myself properly in years. Not really. Sure, I shaved in the mornings, combed my hair before meetings, caught glimpses of my reflection in shop windows. But I hadn't seen myself. Not beyond the uniform of duty I wore each day, husband, provider, father, fixer, background character. I realized that I'd been walking around like a borrowed shadow, not a man. I had let other people's expectations shape me so quietly, so completely, that I couldn't even remember where I ended and the performance began. That's when I booked the flight to Barcelona. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. One evening, after putting Julian to sleep, I sat on the couch scrolling through old bookmarks on my laptop. I saw a saved article, 10 places to lose and find yourself again. Barcelona was number 3. I clicked it. Saw a photo of cobbled streets glowing under orange street lamps, people laughing over wine, and a skyline crowned with the spires of Sagrada Familia. It didn't make me emotional. It just made me curious. I asked myself a simple question I hadn't asked in years. What if I just went? So I did. 2 weeks later, I stepped off a plane into warm Mediterranean air and a language I didn't speak but somehow understood with my bones. I didn't book a tour or make an itinerary. I didn't chase landmarks or take selfies. I just wandered. Walked for hours. Sat in cafes with no one expecting me to get up and clean something. No one asking if I could pick up something for the house. No group chat waiting for my reply. I didn't have to be anyone's foundation. I could just be. One afternoon, I found myself in a quiet neighborhood just outside the tourist center. I walked into a barber shop, not because I needed a haircut, but because I saw my reflection in the glass and thought, I want to meet the man behind those eyes. The barber didn't speak much English. I pointed, nodded, smiled. He nodded back, his hand steady as he began. As he worked, I watched myself in the mirror. Really watched. And what I saw wasn't broken. Tired, yes. Weathered. But also still standing. And not just standing, changing. There was something sharper in my gaze, something less afraid. The lines on my face weren't from stress, they were from surviving it. I realized then that I didn't hate who I had been. I wasn't ashamed of the man who gave, who stayed, who tried. but I did resent how long I stayed lost in other people's needs, hoping someone might one day give back what I poured out so freely. That night, I walked through a local plaza as music drifted in from a guitarist playing under a street lamp. He wasn't looking for fame. He just played because he loved it. And people stopped, not to film, not to clap, just to listen. I sat on a bench nearby and let the sound settle into my chest like rain on dry ground. I thought about how many years I had filled with noise, fake smiles, forced dinners, silent wounds. And how, for the first time in forever, I had no one to answer to but myself. In that stillness, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. The next morning, I took a train up the coast to a small town I couldn't pronounce. I walked along the cliffs, shoes crunching on gravel, ocean wind tugging at my jacket. No one knew me there. No one cared where I'd been or what my story was. And that anonymity felt sacred. It gave me space to look inward and ask, what do I actually want from this life? Not what do others expect. Not what makes sense on paper. Not what keeps everyone comfortable. But me. It sounds like a simple question. It isn't. Because when you've spent years being edited down into a side character in your own story, reclaiming your desires feels rebellious. I wanted peace. I wanted truth. I wanted a life where I didn't have to dim myself to fit into someone else's frame. By the time my trip ended, I had filled a journal with thoughts. Some painful, some profound. One page stood out, the one I titled, The Man I'm Becoming. I wrote, he doesn't wait for approval. He doesn't explain his boundaries. He walks alone without shrinking. He builds his home out of peace, not pity. He loves, but never at the cost of himself. He walks into a room and takes up space. And when people leave, he doesn't chase. He closes the door. When I landed back home, it wasn't dramatic. No tearful reentry, no fireworks. Just me, stepping back into a house that now felt like mine in more ways than one. Julian was with my neighbor Clara, who'd watched him for a few days. I picked him up, and he wrapped his arms around my neck with that innocent joy kids are born with. He didn't care where I had been. He just cared that I came back. Later that evening, after he fell asleep, I stood in the bathroom, looked into the mirror, and saw him in me. His eyes, his mouth, his curiosity. And I thought, if he ever ends up where I was, will he know how to find himself again? I hope he never has to. But if he does, I want him to remember that his father chose himself not out of selfishness, but out of sanity, out of healing. I want him to learn from my silence, and my finally broken one. That night, I took the journal page titled The Man I'm Becoming, folded it carefully, and slid it behind the bathroom mirror. Taped it to the back, where one day, maybe, he'd find it. Not now. Not soon. But one day when life gets loud, and he's looking for a version of himself that got buried under expectation. I hope it reminds him that he comes from a man who made it out. Not bitter. Not broken. But rebuilt. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. No invitations. No group texts. No questions about who was bringing what, or whether I could pick up extra folding chairs from the garage. Just silence. It was the first time in over a decade that I hadn't been part of a holiday plan, hadn't been expected to show up early, stay late, and fix whatever broke in the middle. It should have felt lonely, I guess. But it didn't. It felt clean. Like breathing fresh air after being trapped in a crowded room. Julian was too young to ask questions. We spent the morning baking together. Well, I did most of the baking. He mostly flung flour around the kitchen. I let him. I didn't care about the mess. I cared that he was laughing, safe, and completely unaware of the fractures that had finally stopped splintering because I'd stepped away from the hammer. I didn't plan on seeing anyone that day. I thought it would just be me, Julian, in the quiet. Maybe a movie. Maybe a walk. Nothing dramatic. But around 4 p.m., someone knocked on the door. I froze. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, pretending we weren't home. I didn't want to invite the past back in, not even for a minute. But something about the knock, soft, hesitant, made me pause. I scooped Julian up, set him in the playpen, and walked to the door. When I opened it, I blinked in surprise. It was Harold, my father-in-law. He stood there in a beige coat that looked a size too big for his shrinking frame. His silver hair was neatly combed, and in his hands was a pie. Store-bought. Pumpkin, probably. His eyes were tired, the way someone's eyes get when they've watched the things they built crumble in their hands and aren't sure how to admit their role in it. Mind if I sit? He asked, voice low. I thought about it for a second longer than I needed to. Then I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like he wasn't sure he belonged anymore. He sat at the dining table while I poured us both coffee. Julian cooed from the living room, bouncing a soft toy between his legs. I didn't offer Harold food. I didn't offer explanations. I just sat across from him and waited. For a while, he said nothing. Then he let out a long breath and looked down at his hands. I think we lost something we didn't realize we needed, he said. I didn't respond. I just watched him. His fingers trembled slightly as he sipped his coffee. He looked older than I remembered, like the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. You, he added softly. We lost you. I stared at my mug, steam curling into the air like unspoken words. You were always the one who held it together, he continued. I didn't see it then. None of us did. We were too busy, taking you for granted. Still, I said nothing. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't beg to make things right. He just admitted they broke it. And that, I think, was the only kind of apology I ever really wanted. Not the rehearsed kind. Not the guilt-ridden kind. Just truth. He looked over at Julian and smiled faintly. He's lucky to have you. I hope you know that. I nodded, just once. After a while, he stood up. Left the pie on the counter like it was some kind of peace offering. He didn't ask to hold Julian. Didn't ask to stay. He just buttoned his coat and paused at the door. I know Camilla got what she thought she wanted, he said. The house, the parties, the spotlight. But in the end, she lost the only man who ever stood by her when no one else would. Then he opened the door and walked into the evening cold. I stood there for a moment, door still cracked, wind brushing past me like a whisper from the life I used to live. That night, after Julian fell asleep and the dishes were washed, I lit a candle. Not for mourning, not for ritual, but for peace. The soft flicker danced across the kitchen counter, casting shadows that didn't feel haunted anymore. Just quiet. I sat there with a blanket over my legs, journal in my lap, and wrote 3 words I hadn't written before. I'm finally free. Because freedom isn't always some grand escape. Sometimes, it's as simple as saying no to a cycle that tried to erase you. Sometimes, it's finding joy in your son's laughter instead of chasing approval from people who only clapped when they needed you. Sometimes, it's lighting a candle in your own kitchen and realizing it's the brightest light you've felt in years. I thought a lot about the word goodbye that night. People always think it means slamming doors or throwing words like knives. But for me, it just meant this. I will no longer bleed for people who treat my silence like weakness. Camilla didn't call. She didn't come. She didn't need to. Some hints don't need to be spoken twice. I gave her the spotlight, the family seat, the carefully staged life. She won, and she lost. Because the man she tried to keep on a shelf, steady, simple, invisible, finally walked away. Not to punish, not to disappear, but to live. And from that day forward, I promised myself that no matter who knocked, no matter how many pies they carried, the only doors I would open were the ones that led to peace.